Welcome everyone to this another video in this series of unlearning the falsehoods, where we go back in time and criticize what we were taught in school. Very recently, there has been this incident of Sudhamurthy. Sudhamurthy is the better half of Narayan Murthy, the person who is associated with the mega success of Infosys. All right. So very recently, she made a controversial statement about Raksha Bandhan and its Mughal origins. All right. So this is again why it really represents why exactly are we doing this series of unlearning the falsehoods. Because imagine if she, being an elderly lady of more than 70 years, if that is something that she has learned in her school about Raksha Bandhan, imagine the falsehoods and distortions that were taught to us. Us, when I say us, I mean millennials, Gen X, Y, Z, whatever. Okay, so all the younger generations. Imagine what all lies and distortions you guys might have learned in school. All right. So that is the whole purpose of this series of unlearning the falsehoods, where we demystify and bust some of the myths that has been perpetuated as history by some of the so-called historians. All right. So today we start this video with some reasoning. Okay, how do you exactly justify that? Why were our textbooks justifying the behavior of the colonizer? Okay, meaning if you look at the history textbooks, they will largely talk about how the colonizer came over here with the intent of doing business because they wanted spices. Apparently their meat was very bland in taste, and hence they needed some spices, and solely and merely for the trade of spices, they killed a lot of people, they converted a lot of people, they did a lot of bad things just only for spices. Okay, so why exactly do you read these things in textbook? Why is it that we are not told about what were the real reasons behind the colonizer came over here? All right. uh, and on the other hand, we are being taught that since the colonizer, the Christian colonizer, failed to wipe out the pre-colonial identity that we have, the pre-colonial history that we have, the culture that we have, the failure of the colonizer to wipe out, to the failure of the colonizer to completely convert us to their faith is cited as an evidence of secularism, and it's cited as a justification or a reasoning or a rationale given for them coming over here. Some to this very day, if you refer to any of the history textbooks, they will cite this as the reason for the colonizer to come over here. Okay, now the main question is, why so? Even though it's known as common knowledge, why do the history textbooks justify the colonizer coming over here based on that they came over here for trade and nothing else? It is to distract you from the real reason. Believe it or not, it worked. It has worked since the transfer of power in 1947. We never questioned the real motives of the British coming over here. Why? Because our history textbook tell us that they came over here just to trade, nothing else. All right. Another reason is to insulate. Okay, you might have observed this in our mainstream media as well. The degree of scrutiny that we do of our indigenous knowledge systems, we never scrutinize the Bible or Quran for that matter with such degree of scrutiny. All right, because we are distracted. We have been kept distracted by our schools, by our history textbooks, into thinking that the colonizer came over here and it was somehow a good thing and not a bad thing. Funny how this colonial consciousness works, isn't it? Okay, so now that we know that so and so were the reasons behind justifying the colonial behavior, now what exactly are the ramifications in our real life? What are the manifestations that you see in today's society, in day-to-day world, that explains this or that displays this in real life? Number one is our conception of religion has changed. Okay, the colonizer has brought in this view of religion being something and an umbrella under which the entire society is homogenized. Okay, Look, think of it as a garden that has just only one sort of flowers, just simply a garden of red roses. The entire garden is red. That is the conception of religion for the Western mind. Okay, for us, the conception of religion is more like a mixture of lot of flowers. It could be white tulips, red roses, all the multiple colored roses in one single garden. Whereas to a Western mind, religion is a garden with just a single colored rose or a single colored flower. So that is how we as people have started viewing religion as. This is something that has been left by the colonizer, and that is not something that is native to this land. Second is we have started viewing things through racial lens. Okay, earlier there wasn't exactly any caste consciousness. Again, caste is not a Sanskrit word, not a Hindi word, or any indigenous language does not have this word. Caste is something that was brought to us by the Portuguese. So that is also something that the colonial consciousness has done. Okay, we constantly view our society through caste consciousness. And the third thing is the nation state model that again draws its inspiration from a homogeneous society. So if there is a garden that is entirely of roses, that country could be called as a nation state of rose. Okay, you cannot have different types of roses in a nation state of rose. So that is something that has done to us. We constantly keep harking back to these principles of the West, and that is something that colonial consciousness has done. On top of that, what else, or what are some consequences that has come out of this colonial consciousness is a feeling of shame about our own culture. Yes, it is true. Uh, so you might have already seen this. You might have also observed this in amongst few of your friends as well. If they talk with you, they'll talk about all the greatness of this civilization and whatnot. The moment somebody from the West comes into the conversation, we somehow tacitly agree to this premise that, oh, our civilization is somewhat backward to the Western civilization. It is indeed something that has, been hardwired into us since, I would say, 17th century. All right, so feeling of shame about your own culture, that is something that this colonial consciousness has perpetuated. Secondly, due to this shame, we somehow believe that our civilization is somewhat backward. Okay, the colonizer came over here with this myth, okay, that science, that is Vigyan, science is the sole monopoly of the West. The entire knowledge corpus of science has come out of the West. Okay, I'll give you one example for this. Everybody here knows that the Pythagoras theorem is somewhere mentioned in our old Vedic scriptures. In fact, all the other scientific principles outside, in the outside world, can be traced back to either of one of our Vedic scriptures. But we still are hell bent on calling it the Pythagoras theorem, Newton's law of gravity. It is all a very, let me put it this way. Okay, the church the church had a very big role to play to popularize this concept of science being the sole monopoly of the West. It was as if before the era of enlightenment in the West, nobody on this face of earth knew what science was. All right, so this belief that the Westerner was enlightened and hence they are the one who have sole monopoly over science has somehow made us think that we are backward. Okay, and the last part is the desire to learn from the colonizer. Since we have accepted this subconsciously that the colonizer or the West is somehow better than us, this has, led us to think that, okay, we can learn something from it. There is definitely one or two things to learn from the colonizer, but it is in the field of lying, deception, and all that. There is nothing good to be learned from the colonizer. All right. So yes, this myth that science is the sole repository of the West is all that is. That is a myth. Okay. So the thing that the colonizer actually believed, okay, that the pagan worship, the devil worshipping pagan, the heathen does not know what science is, and it is the moral responsibility of the Christian colonizer to teach the devil worshipper, to teach the pagan that, oh, this is science and this is how you're supposed to do. Okay, why exactly? Again, going back to that idea of garden of roses, they wanted to see that the entire garden, that is Bharat, should be filled with roses of Christian nature. Okay, hence each and every effort on the educational front to do so. Okay, now there was this inherent belief amongst in the colonizer that the pagan needed to be educated. Why? Because we are devil worshipping and hence we are immoral. Hence this idea of and the moral obligation of the white person, or the moral obligation of the colonizer to educate. Okay, now since because they thought that science was the sole monopoly of the colonizer from the west. Okay, so everything they did was said to be scientific. So since they are racially superior, that means it was scientifically proven that they are racially superior. Why? Because of the myth that science is the monopoly of the west. So this is how it goes about. Now, next up, you might ask that, okay, all this is good, and all this sounds good and whatnot, but what actually is the purpose of identification of colonial consciousness? What exactly would we do even if we identified that, yes, we are mentally colonized? Okay, so currently, if you become conscious of the colonial lens that you have, what we can do is we can change the paths down which Bharat is currently going. Okay, we are currently going down the path of a modern democracy, and by modern democracy, I mean the Western model of democracy. All right. So, if we really become conscious about the fact that we have a colonial bias in our political system, we have a colonial bias in our administration and judicial system as well. So we can make some modifications, and we don't go down that path of modern nation state democracy that in a sense is a Christian model. Yes. Okay. And the second thing, okay, there is this also increasing tendency among largely young people. I see that they somehow provide this justification that our own culture is somewhat a variation of Western civilization. That's not the case. Okay, there is an individualistic identity that Bharat has that is completely different from the Western civilization, and you will see that the entire scholarship of the West is hell bent on convincing us that our version of civilization is in a way a variant of the Western civilization, when clearly there are distinctions. And the last part, I will connect this point to the concept of colonization in the upcoming videos, but for this video you must understand that Marxism in a way that has come up from the ideas of Karl Marx, obviously, as the name suggests, and then the future that develops into communism. Okay, now this particular ideology has provided a cushion to the colonial consciousness. How exactly? Because Marxism agrees that the science is the monopoly of the West. By West I mean the Europe. Okay, Marxism has perpetuated and consolidated this myth inside our heads that science has come from the West. Rationality, although it is universal, that is the rational thinking capacity inside human beings, although it is universal, but it has its origin only in Europe. Okay, so although communism might sound as something that has come up in opposition to capitalism, which is based on the idea of colonization, but in effect, Marxism or communism is providing some cushion, okay, to the colonial consciousness, that we already have inside our brain. Meaning, it is positively reinforcing this colonial consciousness that we have inside our brains. In effect, it makes us think that no, we are revolting against the colonialism. But in effect, when you are Marxist, you are inadvertently perpetuating and reinforcing this myth into our consciousness that somehow West is better. All right. Also, Marxism looks at the past with a sense of condescension and contempt. This also makes it difficult for somebody who is traditional to survive in the modern society. That's all for this video in the series that is unlearning the falsehoods. I will see you guys in the next video.